SH Reads Books. In this episode, we propose our books.
I will now be recommending the book called Huckleberry Finn for the 8th graders of next year.
Give you a tour of our wonderful library.
Here we can see that the library contains books that the secondary 1s and 2s are currently reading.
And read to elementary school students.
And my head is made of blueberry pizza.
I'm Brad, and you're watching SHTV. Welcome to SHTV. I'm your host, Brad. This week's episode is dedicated to reading, and what better place to talk about reading than in the library?
Hi, SHTV. I'm reading a book about Steve Jobs, the previous owner of Apple. In the library, we can learn a lot of things, maybe even to own a big company one day. Thank you.
Donc, j'ai eu de la difficulté à choisir mon livre préféré de tous les temps, mais j'ai pris mon livre préféré de la dernière année, 2022. Et puis, c'est Ken Follett, Pour rien au monde. En anglais, en fait, c'est la version française du livre Never de Ken Follett. Puis, en fait, c'est en fait le déclenchement de la Troisième Guerre mondiale, selon Ken Follett. Donc, on suit l'histoire de plusieurs personnages qui ont un petit ou un grand rôle à jouer dans le déclenchement de la Troisième Guerre mondiale. Puis, ce qui est vraiment intéressant dans ce roman-là, c'est que en fait, Ken Follett se base sur des tensions diplomatiques qui existent déjà dans le monde. Donc, c'est une fiction, donc c'est pas une vraie histoire, mais dans le fond, ça pourrait le devenir éventuellement. Puis, en fait, ça fait grandement réfléchir, puis ça fait même presque un peu peur de voir qu'on pourrait assister à une Troisième Guerre mondiale dans les prochaines années.
Have you ever thought your teacher's book choices were questionable? Well, we gave the opportunity to students from every grade level to pick a book that they think we should read instead.
The book that I would recommend to Secondary 1 students is called The Boundless. The author of this book is Kenneth Opel. Kenneth was born in Port Alberni but spent most of his childhood in Victoria, BC. It's around the age of 12 that he realized that he wanted to be a writer. The story takes place all over Canada in the largest train to ever exist, The Boundless. Will Everett, the story's main character, has always wished for an adventure. Much to his surprise, his adventure began the moment he boarded the Boundless, the longest, most elegant locomotive in the world. After witnessing a murder during a station stop, he barely makes it back onto the train, where he must work his way from the caboose to his father, who happens to be seated in first class, all while the murderer and his companion are after him. This is where the real excitement begins. I would recommend this novel because it is an action-packed book that has many events and a decent plot development to keep the reader interested.
Hi, SHTV. You may be wondering why I am wearing a straw hat. Well, it's simple. I will now be recommending a book called Huckleberry Finn for the 8th graders of next year. In the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, who is a 13-year-old boy who lives in the 1800s, tries to escape his drunken father and goes on an adventure with Jim, who is a slave, down the Mississippi River. I recommend this book for 8th graders because the main character, who is Huckleberry Finn, is 13 years old. So, the 13-year-olds in 8th grade will be able to identify with the main character. And also, by reading this book, they will be able to familiarize and note what they should be doing instead of being on their phone. The most important reason I recommend this book for 8th graders is because they'll have a great fun time reading it, because it's a rare thing to find nowadays. A nice, good book you can sit down at any time and read with a cup of coffee in your hand.
For the second threes, we recommend the book Six of Crows. We chose this book because it includes 6 characters that are very diverse and have very different personalities. So I do think a lot of the students reading the book would be able to find a character that they relate to quite a lot. There are also very complex characters, and the book also talks about some heavier topics like drug abuse in a more fantasy and lighter manner, which I think could make them easier to understand.
Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This story follows Phileas Fogg, an English gentleman who enjoys playing card games with his friends at the Reform Club. Considering that the protagonist has never been married or had kids, he tends to keep to himself quite often. In the novel, readers can discover that Fogg suffers from obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is OCD, and it dominates his life. For example, when his old servant failed to perform to his standards, he fired him and replaced him with another one, Jean Passepartout. Following a robbery that took place in England, Fogg and his friends at the club discussed the recent events. A disagreement ensued, leading to a bet being made between the men. Fogg bet his friend 20,000 British pounds, which are all his savings, that he will be able to travel around the world in 80 days, beginning that night. The moment Fogg's bet was publicized, Detective Fix, a London detective, suspected Fogg himself of being the robber. Fix decided to track Fogg down and catch him in order to receive money for catching the prime suspect of this major crime. Will Fogg be able to complete his journey in time? Will Detective Fix catch him and send him to jail? And was he even the actual criminal in this case? Read the book to find out.
I think a novel that secondary 5 students should read is The Perks of Being a Wallflower because it represents well the idea of being a teenager. In this book, we can see a socially awkward teen named Charlie who has 2 friends who we meet throughout the book, and we just see his evolution and how he gets at the end of the book, and it's very interesting to see since we are living the same reality as him.
Bonjour, alors je vais vous parler d'un de mes romans préférés qui s'appelle Le Parfum. C'est un roman qui a été écrit par Patrick Süskind en 1985. Le deuxième titre de ce roman, c'est Histoire d'un meurtrier, parce que c'est ça, c'est l'histoire d'un meurtrier. Je l'aime beaucoup parce que, premièrement, c'est mon grand-père qui me l'a donné, le livre. Ensuite, parce que quand je l'ai lu, c'était la première fois que je lisais une histoire dans ce genre-là. Donc, le héros, si on veut dire, de l'histoire, il est méchant, c'est vraiment une personne horrible, puis on le suit à travers ses meurtres. Donc, j'étais vraiment intriguée par l'histoire parce que le personnage principal, comme je disais, il est horrible et il a un odorat, il a comme un don pour sentir les choses et donc il veut créer des parfums pour contrôler les gens. Donc, c'est pour ça que je trouvais ça très intéressant comme roman, je vous le conseille beaucoup.
In this school, many students had the chance to meet authors. We got the opportunity to sit down with one of them, Audrée Archambault, and ask her 5 questions.
Je m'appelle Audrey, je suis autrice, donc mon métier c'est d'écrire des romans, surtout des romans pour les jeunes. J'ai plusieurs séries déjà pour les petits autant que les plus vieux.
Comment décidez-vous du sujet de vos romans? Essayez-vous d'être original ou de livrer aux lecteurs ce qu'ils veulent?
Je dirais que ça prend un mélange des deux parce qu'avec le temps, on apprend à connaître nos lecteurs et lectrices. Donc, on sait ce qu'ils aiment, ce qu'ils ont apprécié de nos derniers tomes sortis, par exemple. Mais en même temps, moi, je trouve que c'est ultra important d'être original puis pas juste donner quelque chose que nos lecteurs connaissent déjà très bien. Donc, généralement, je vais partir de quelque chose qui vient de ma tête complètement, quelque chose qui, moi, m'allume, parfois inspiré par des livres que j'ai lus plus jeunes, par des séries télé que j'ai regardées, par des choses que j'aurais aimé vivre. Puis après ça, c'est plus peut-être dans le déroulement des actions, dans l'enchaînement des péripéties que je vais mettre de l'émotion, de l'action. Et là, ça, je sais ce que mes lecteurs ont envie de lire, mais je m'inspire beaucoup de choses que moi, j'ai vécues quand j'étais plus jeune.
Souvenez-vous de ce que vous ressentez lorsque vous avez publié votre premier livre.
Quand j'ai publié mon premier livre, là, jusqu'à la dernière seconde, jusqu'au moment où mon livre était sur la tablette en librairie, j'y croyais pas. J'étais certaine que quelqu'un me dirait « Oh non, laisse faire, finalement on va pas publier ton livre » ou « Ben, on a changé d'idée, on n'en a pas besoin finalement ». Donc vraiment, on aurait dit que ça a pris la première journée, la journée de sa sortie. Ça fait 5 ans d'ailleurs, la sortie de mon premier livre. Je me suis rendue en bibliothèque, puis là je l'ai vu sur la tablette. Puis c'était un mélange de fierté, de syndrome de l'imposteur à l'os, puis aussi, j'y croyais pas encore complètement. Même maintenant, dans mon métier, des fois, je dois me pincer quand je pense que mon métier, c'est autrice, puis c'est ça que je rêvais de faire quand j'avais 6, 7, 8 ans.
Quel type de recherche faites-vous et combien de temps passez-vous à faire des recherches avant de commencer un livre?
Souvent, en fait, je vais faire mes recherches alors que j'ai déjà commencé l'écriture du livre. Moi, quand j'écris un livre, je fais ce que j'appelle un premier jet. C'est comme le brouillon du brouillon. Hein? Donc, je m'installe devant mon ordinateur, puis j'écris l'histoire là, sans m'arrêter, sans réfléchir à savoir si c'est censé ou pas, si ça se répète ou pas. Puis après ça, quand je relis, c'est là que je vois les sections où j'ai besoin de faire plus des recherches, que ce soit sur un sujet précis. Par exemple, dans ma série Sarah Lou, à un moment donné, on parle des serpents, mais j'avais besoin d'apprendre des choses sur les serpents afin de les partager dans mon livre. Ou bien dans mon 4e tome de Sarah Lou, ça se passe à New York. Je suis allée plusieurs fois à New York, mais je devais vérifier sur des cartes où sont placés les différents endroits où elle va. Sinon, le type de recherche que je fais aussi, c'est de faire lire des extraits à des gens qui connaissent mieux le sujet que moi et qui peuvent m'aider. Dans Sarah Lou, encore une fois, Sarah Lou, elle a des amis, des gens qui l'aident, qui parlent d'autres langues. Et puis, dans mon roman, les dialogues sont écrits dans cette langue-là. Dans mon dernier, c'était un personnage qui parlait haïtien-créole. Puis moi, je parle pas cette langue-là. Donc, j'ai envoyé les dialogues à des gens dont c'est la langue, c'est une des langues qu'ils parlent à la maison, puis elles ont pu confirmer si ça avait du sens ou pas.
Croyez-vous au syndrome de la page blanche?
Oui, c'est vrai, ça existe pour de vrai. Le nombre de fois où je m'installe devant mon ordinateur puis que je suis complètement bloquée, je sais pas par où commencer, ça m'arrive régulièrement. Heureusement, pour ça, je pense qu'il y a des remèdes, entre autres préparer un plan clair avec beaucoup de détails avant de commencer à écrire, ça aide. Et sinon, le premier jet. Quand je parle du brouillon, c'est ça, c'est de se mettre à écrire sans juger ce qu'on écrit, sans s'arrêter, même si ça se répète, même si on fait des fautes, même si ça n'a pas trop de sens, c'est pas grave, on relira par la suite. Donc ça, c'est 2 petits remèdes qui m'aident à passer au travers, mais ça m'arrive encore régulièrement, même si c'est mon métier.
Quel est le livre que vous avez eu le plus de plaisir à écrire?
Je pense que le livre que j'ai préféré écrire, ce serait le 4e tome de Sarah Lou, parce que ma série Sarah Lou, le tout premier tome, c'est le premier roman que j'ai écrit. Donc pour moi, j'ai un sentiment vraiment spécial par rapport à cette série-là. Et le 4e, je l'ai écrit plusieurs années après le 3e. Donc là, j'avais l'impression que j'avais maîtrisé encore plus l'écriture, puis j'ai vraiment voulu m'amuser. C'est un livre que j'ai mis en scène à New York, qui est une ville que j'adore. Il est plus épais que les autres, il y a beaucoup plus d'action. Donc j'ai eu énormément de plaisir. Mais sinon, il y a ma série Elle et Alix aussi, qui est une série style dont vous êtes le héros. Je dirais pas que j'ai eu du plaisir à l'écrire. Je dirais même qu'elle m'a causé d'énormes maux de tête, mais en même temps, c'était un défi extraordinaire d'essayer de trouver comment faire fonctionner cette toile d'araignée-là, parce que les lecteurs, lectrices peuvent faire des choix dans le livre et ça change complètement l'histoire.
Une question bonus serait: où pouvons-vous trouver sur les réseaux sociaux?
J'adore partager mon quotidien d'autrice sur les réseaux sociaux. Alors, je suis entre autres sur Instagram et TikTok. Mon username est le même, c'est @Audrée, _ autrice.
Pour mon coup de cœur littéraire, j'ai sélectionné La vie heureuse de Sénèque. Ce petit essai philosophique est un petit guide pour vivre heureux. C'est ça que j'aime bien avec la philosophie romaine. Contrairement à la philosophie grecque, c'est un vrai mode d'emploi pour la vie qui nous explique comment se comporter en amour, comment se comporter en amitié, comment se comporter dans la vie de tous les jours pour attirer vers soi la joie et le bonheur. Voilà, Sénèque.
It's been a while since I've put my own creative input into an episode of SHTV, but as soon as I heard the topic of this week's episode, I knew I needed to have my own segment. So, these are the top 5 books Melissa thinks you need to read before you graduate high school.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and these are the top 5 books I think everyone should read before they graduate high school. So the first book I want to recommend is Darius the Great is Not Okay by Audrée. This is a story of a young Iranian-American boy going back to Iran for the first time to visit his sick grandfather, and he makes an unexpected friend along the way. I think this book is so interesting because of the way that it explores teenage friendship and struggling with one's identity and their culture and grappling with your mental health. I think it's something that every teenager can see themselves in to some extent, especially if you are Middle Eastern, if you share any sort of culture with Darius, who is a young teenage boy, he's probably like 15. You'll really see yourself in him to some extent. And you know, sometimes I was taken back by how much I felt myself and my culture reflected in Darius's. But yeah, it's very solid, and it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and when you put it down, you'll be thinking about it for days, and I could not stop recommending it to everyone in my circle once I was done with it. So I knew I wanted to include a classic within my top 5, and originally I was gravitating towards The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which is arguably the best coming-of-age story of all time, but I knew that you'd probably already read this in high school for English class, especially if you have Mr. Lou, so I decided to go in a different direction and recommend Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Fair warning, this is a break. I know it can be intimidating because it's like 800 pages, but the lettering is very big, and it's originally more of a children's novel, so it's pretty easy to read, don't worry. This book is set in the late 1800s and follows 4 sisters from their youth all the way to their adulthood, when they're grown and they have husbands and children. And this book is so special because it's just a story of growth. You watch these girls become women, and obviously adolescence is the time for growth, and so I think it's really just a precious experience to watch this relationship between these sisters bloom, and each of them as individuals bloom, and you become so attached to them. And I think the best part of this book is the fact that Louisa May Alcott is able to sneak in a message or moral into the end of every single chapter, and she's able to do it in a way where it doesn't feel forced or like you're being subbed a moral down your throat, but it's really effective, and I think it makes you think, it just makes you learn and appreciate just the growth that these girls do, and maybe reflect on your own growth as a teenager. So I knew I wanted to recommend something that was a little more accessible to everyone, and I was going through a few different young adult authors in my head, and I ended up landing on Elizabeth Acevedo. So basically read anything by her, but I'm specifically going to recommend The Poet X, which is her debut novel. The Poet X follows a young girl named Xiomara as she kind of deals with the inherent angst of being a teenager, but specifically in her situation as a young Black girl. She's angry and she's frustrated, and she uses poetry as a vice. She pours out her frustration onto the page, and the book is written in verse, so it's really just an accessible experience that anyone can do. There's not a lot of words on the pages, but it's just such a great story. It's written beautifully, and I think every teenager is angry to an extent, and they can see themselves in her and her frustration and her pain, even if it's not exactly her experience. Elizabeth Acevedo just does a really great job at capturing the inherent frustration of adolescence. My 4th book is going to be The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I have the French version here with me, but I've read the English one as well. And obviously this is a classic. I don't really think it needs an introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. The Little Prince follows a pilot who crashes in the middle of the desert and then comes into contact with a little boy named the Little Prince, who tells him about his experience traveling different planets all the way to the land on Earth. And it's just a really nice, wholesome story almost about love and friendship, and a very subtle critique of the world we live in through the different characters that the Little Prince meets on the different islands or planets he travels. It's just a wholesome experience, but it's also something you can learn from, and because it's such a short book, I think if you read it multiple times throughout your life, every single time you read it, you'll gain something new from it. You'll look at it with a new perspective. I know I've read this probably 4 or 5 times since I was a kid, and every single time I find myself in awe of the new things I discover. I think it's a book that makes you reflect on the world around you, and it packs such a hard punch in so few pages. Just required reading, in my opinion. The 5th and final book I'm going to recommend is probably the one I feel most adamant about, and that is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Alice Oseman is one of those authors who I'll recommend like their gospel, but this book specifically follows Frances, who is a high school student in their last year of secondary school in the UK, and she's someone who's really good at school but doesn't really like it. She has more artistic pursuits that she wants to follow but doesn't really feel like there's a path for her there, and so it's just kind of a critique of not feeling like the school system is necessarily something that works for you. Like, you're confused about what to do after you graduate when it seems like none of the paths that are available to you really fit you. Both through Frances and Alid, I think a lot of the questions that we ask ourselves as high school students, especially in our last few years of high school, are answered, or at least asked. The chapters are short and the writing is funny, and I think the messages about identity that Alice Oseman is able to weave through this quirky little book is really vital for any high school student to read. And to finish this off, I kind of want to cheat a little bit for a +1. A story that everyone should consume before they graduate is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Though not the original book by Stephen Chbosky, this is fine. The movie, though, it's probably the only time I'll ever hear me say this, is much better than the book. It's great, and it's a perfect coming-of-age story that everyone should watch.
Bonjour, je vais vous présenter La cantatrice chauve d'Eugène Ionesco. C'est un livre que j'ai beaucoup aimé et que j'enseigne cette année au secondaire 4. Je connaissais Ionesco auparavant à travers la pièce Rhinocéros, mais ici la situation est un petit peu différente. On se focalise sur la classe bourgeoise et leur difficulté à communiquer parce qu'ils n'ont pas grand-chose à faire dans leur quotidien. Et ce que j'aime beaucoup, c'est la réflexion qui est menée autour de l'utilité du langage et la quasi-impossibilité d'utiliser le langage comme outil de communication, puisque à travers la pièce, le langage est de plus en plus incohérent, réduit à des banalités et finit par éclater en une cacophonie générale.
The early years of elementary school are when a lot of students discover reading for the first time, which is why children's books can be crucial. This week's SHTV challenge explores just that.
Hi, I'm Karni Doshkunyan, the host of the SHTV challenge. Reading books to children can be quite intimidating, but to a class, it's even worse. Let's see what today's challenge is.
Hi, my name is Lori Dukadjian. I teach in grade 2 and I challenge the few secondary 1 students to choose a book that they have never read before and come and read it to my class and make it interesting.
I think I would scare those children. But anyway, let's meet our challengers.
Hi, I'm Olivia Chakmak.
And I'm Kana Shukakelian.
And we're both in Sec 1.
We accept the reading challenge.
Now that we know who our challengers are, let's see if Vana and Olivia will be able to read this book with absolutely no pictures.
Okay.
Good enough.
This is a book with no pictures. It might seem like no fun to have someone read you a book with no pictures. It probably seems boring and serious, except here is how books work. Everything the words say, the person reading the book has to say, no matter what. That's the deal, that's the rule. So that means even if the words say
Keep on it. Wait. Sorry guys. Okay. Give me. Okay. Blork. Wait, what? That doesn't even mean anything. Blurf. Wait a second. This isn't the kind of book I wanted to read, and I have to say every word the book says. Uh-oh. Wait, I'll just hold it. Say. Don't say.
I am a monkey. I am a monkey who taught myself to read. And how I am reading you this book with my monkey mouth in my monkey voice. That's not true. I'm not a monkey. Yes, I am a monkey. Also, I am a robot monkey.
And my head is made of blueberry pizza. Wait a second. Is this whole book a trick? Can I stop reading, please? No.
And how it's time for me to sing you my favorite song. A song. Do I really have to sing a... Glug glug. My face is a glug. I eat ants for breakfast. Right off the rug. This book is ridiculous. Can I stop reading yet? No. There are more pages. I have to read the rest. My only friend in the whole wide world, a hippo named Boo Butt. Boo Boo Butt.
And also, the kid I'm reading this book to is the best kid ever in the history of the entire world. Oh, really? And this kid is the smartest kid too, because this kid chose this book, even though it has no picture. Oh my God. Because kids know this is the book that makes grown-ups have to say silly things. And make silly sounds. Like, oh no, here it comes. Yes, please.
Glurgo whack magular I roar roar.
Emph blackety blackety glippity gloppity gloppity glippity beep boop e badongi face.
Oh my goodness. Please don't ever make me read this book again. It is so silly. In fact, it's completely and utterly preposterous. Next time, please choose a book with pictures. Please, because this is too ridiculous to read. The end. Bonk.
Thank you.
I have to say, I'm quite impressed. I didn't know that they would be able to read this book with absolutely no pictures. Join us next week for another SHTV challenge.
Bonjour, je suis Myriam Lauzon, enseignante de français en 3e et 5e secondaire, et mon livre préféré, c'est L'ombre du vent de Carlos Ruiz Zafón, un espagnol. Donc, c'est une traduction parce que ça a été écrit en espagnol à la base. J'ai lu ça quand j'avais 16-17 ans, donc l'âge des élèves un peu de l'école. Et je me souviens avoir été comme enchantée par cette lecture-là. L'histoire, en fait, c'est que c'est un petit garçon à Barcelone qui rentre avec son père dans le cimetière des livres oubliés. Et il doit choisir un roman pour l'adopter. Et ce roman-là devient le sien. Et il va traverser des épreuves, des aventures complètement mystérieuses grâce à ce roman-là. Et puis, je me souviens d'avoir été envoûtée dès la première page, puis je voulais savoir ce qui allait arriver, puis c'est tout un univers qui m'avait vraiment plu. Alors, je vous le conseille.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of SHTV. We hope it inspired you to pick up a book. Now, let's leave you with some final book recommendations.
When asked to describe my favorite book, I would have to pick Forgotten Fire by Adam Baghdasaryan, which is read by the secondary 2 students at Surpagop for English class. It talks about the Armenian genocide of 1915, and it's completely relatable to our clientele. But the beauty of it is, because it's in English, it allows the other people who do not speak the language and who are not Armenian to learn about our story. It summarizes the events of the genocide very well. It's a heartfelt book. It's very emotional. It's very descriptive. But at the end, it's very hopeful. And this is why I would pick it as one of my favorite books.
Hi, this is Mr. Liu, and in today's episode you saw a lot of teachers talk about the books that they recommend and that they hold as a favorite for themselves. And it would not be an episode without me doing the same thing. So I'm holding in my hands a copy of the very first book that I really enjoyed. It's called Half a Nice Day by Wrestler McFoley. He's actually a wrestler that I actually met twice, and his book was one that got me motivated to read. And it truly shows that if you're interested in something that you read, you can read it really quickly. So the idea here is, I enjoyed this book from front to back. I've actually read it more than one time, and my advice to you for whatever book you may have is pick something you enjoy, pick something that you like, and the reading will basically do itself.